We try and get through this thing. Let's cross down to Canberra now and catch up with a Queensland Liberal MP, Andrew Laming. We caught up with him last week. He's a medical doctor into the bargain. Good to talk to you again, Andrew. Extraordinary lack of party political infighting in Parliament today. Politicians actually focused on the issue as we'd expect them to be.
Low-density Parliament, Chris, that's right. And Australians have always wanted the Parliament to come together on issues like this, and it's happening here. It's good to hear the words of Anna Bligh and the banks. I mean, fundamentally, we need the payment systems in this country to keep working. We need strong banks. We had them in 09-10. They got us through the GFC. Major reason why we escaped that pretty unscathed. But we will have, in my electorate and everyone across the country, people whose livelihoods have gone up in smoke this week, jobs that have amounted to nothing, people who are sitting around the table working out how they're going to get through it. There's been an incredible appetite to understand this stimulus. It's a big stimulus. It's very, very complicated for a lot of people. They've tried to read Treasury fact sheets, not something that everyone's terribly capable of doing. But I certainly appreciate the huge queues there are at Centrelink all around the country. We're asking everyone to respect social distancing and in these long queues, and understand that there's an enormous workload for public servants, both state and federal, right around the country.
Yeah, let's just go to a couple of things, because I think what was pleasing today is we didn't see sort of pointless party political point scoring, but we did see Labor asking some probing questions to which Australians deserve answers. One of those was what on earth went on with Centrelink, a suggestion that there was a cyber attack, and then the correction from Stuart Robert that that wasn't the case. It was just an overloaded system, right? So we got some, we got the wrong diagnosis there early.
Yeah, that's right. So we're absolutely familiar with these huge calls on IT systems. We saw it with the census as well. But Australians, while they're extremely nervous, there's going to be frayed emotions. They're relying on their leaders to provide consistent, clear and calm messaging. That's absolutely happening from both levels of Parliament, through a national cabinet, with all premiers involved. So I want this to be a model period, not where one party gets some sort of political leg up, but where Australia can look back and say that the right calls were made early. And you can remember there was a lot of support for Kevin Rudd in a similar phase here. Obviously some coalition disagreement into 2010 when that stimulus went on long after Treasury had predicted the GFC was over.
Yep.
But we do appreciate the bipartisanship we're getting at the moment.
Right, but we've got to make sure we get the right decisions being made, and that's another issue Labor zeroed in on, and I think quite rightly, and that is how on earth could these 2,700 people have been allowed off the Ruby Princess in Sydney? We've got state and federal governments sort of buck-passing here. They're both involved. The idea that these people would come off and we've had the virus spread from that around the country is obviously a big mistake, and people need to be guaranteed that those sorts of mistakes won't happen again.
They do, and for a long time it was made completely clear that ultimately the health reaction and the health response is entirely with New South Wales Health. So that question has to be asked of that Health Minister. There is absolute confusion and fear around, obviously, people returning. We've had the cut-offs to international travel. People don't know whether a cruise ship has been disembarking at other locations or not. They just want to know that every precaution is taken.
So
the
precaution here,
contact is traced.
The precaution here is go into self-isolation because you've come back into Australia.
Of course.
But it's impossible to go into self-isolation then back in Perth because you have to fly there on a plane, etc. This is where we've been caught short.
Yeah, that's quite right. And we've allowed certain amounts of public transport, essentially Ubers and taxis to private homes, but that subsequent travel moving through large airports and onto planes just wasn't accounted for at the time. And ultimately you've got to rely on the directions that are given to those public servants who were there at the docking procedure. Obviously, I'm from Queensland. I can't speak with much more experience, but we have similar questions with our populated islands. I've got many in my electorate, and people are worried about the non-essential travel that's occurring to geographically isolated islands. We've got the same questions with crowded public transport, both water-based water taxis, buses and trains. But what we are noticing, just like petroleum and fuel reserves, is that as non-essential travel starts to ebb, they will have far fewer people in transport, far fewer people in transit in general, and the burden is coming off a lot of the pressures, including schools, where turnouts this week at schools have been so much lower that there has not been a clear message between the states on social distancing nor on school closures. Schools doing states doing different things, and of course in this day and age everyone in Queensland is watching exactly what Victorian schools do and then asking a million questions because these states have to work together. and have to have a consistent message. The
Just
National
very-
Cabinet is obviously bound by the right of individual premiers to make calls on their own schools, and regrettably they've been a little bit out of step.
Well, the more they do it together, state and federal, I think the better. Just very briefly, what's happening in Parliament? Is it done? Have you got that economic package through yet, or is there still some sitting to go?
We're very, very close to that. We've been told to stay tonight. We'll be there tomorrow to put any dots on I's and crosses on T's. But look, every MP just wants to get home. We want to be helping our communities. We want non-essential travel and activities stopping. We want people continuing to be part of the economy if it's essential. And we want people recognising social distancing and just listening to guidelines. Sometimes they're complex. MPs play a role in deciphering them. But please, if you've got a question, reach out and ask. And finally, please don't spread fake news. In this day and age of social media, that's the last thing we need to get people focusing on guidelines and working together, because as the Prime Minister said, every one of us is on the front line here.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Andrew.